I'm Jessica Paxton, Senior Product Marketing at Smith.ai. And if you've been to one of our webinars before, you've probably seen me on these webinars. I'm going to be the host today, so I will not be talking much. I'll be asking questions, help facilitate the webinar. Now, if you do have questions, go ahead and ask in the chat or in the Q&A module, because Wendy, she's open to questions. We want to make sure we're answering anything that you want to ask. So go ahead and ask those questions. Now, if for any reason you can't stay today, that's okay. Immediately after the webinar, I will email out the recording as soon as Zoom processes it. Sometimes it takes up to an hour. I'll email out the recording. I'll email out my contact info, Wendy's contact info, and that e-workbook that we're going to talk about in a little bit that Wendy made for everyone. So we have Wendy Wylde today, and I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about herself, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So Wendy?
All right, so I'm Wendy Wylde, as Jessica said, and I am the owner of Matterflow Advisors. And what we focus on at Matterflow Advisors is helping law firms in particular create automated workflows using Lawmatics. And I've been doing this for, I guess, a little over 2 years. I've been helping law firms, big and small, implement systems that are custom designed. And then I work with some firms that we do template work for, where we just are really helping them get started so that they can launch their own CRMs. And I actually had worked at Lawmatics for a time. So I'm really, really intimately aware of the challenges that firms face when they're trying to implement that platform. And so it's just been a really easy way for me to support law firms because I know that platform really well. And of course, I use other tools in my own business and I advise firms on other tools. And so we're going to talk about a bunch of those today. And so that's a little bit about me. And I guess, like Jessica said, I'm in San Diego and it's lovely here. And I love every second of being here.
Okay, great. So we're going to go over a lot. We're going to have a real world case study to really illustrate the impact that automation has on efficiency, client satisfaction, staff well-being. I think, Wendy, we're going to do that last, right? I think.
Yeah, the case study we'll talk about last.
All right. First, we're going to talk about practical automation tools, examples, things that you can actually do inside your business. We're going to talk about task lists, creating task lists. What else are we going to go over? Automating client communication. Is that right?
Yep. Client communication.
I feel like I'm missing something.
I'm going to talk about 3 tools and how those tools can be easily implemented depending on like maybe some of you are not law firms. And so I'm going to talk about some tools that you can use and some ways to streamline your own business, even if you're a solopreneur and working for yourself. So really trying to not talk explicitly to law firms, even though I know maybe some of you in here are lawyers.
Perfect. Well, that sounds great. And again, if there's any questions throughout this, let's go ahead and ask. So Wendy, let's just dig right in, get started.
Yeah, let's dig right in. And before I get started, I want to say, if you guys have questions, I'm going to attempt to answer those questions while I'm talking, but if I miss them, we'll go back and answer them in the Q&A. And I was a teacher, so hopefully I can deliver this in a way that makes sense to all of you. But if you feel confused, certainly that's a great place to ask for clarification. And so where I want to start, I'm going to do this in like a why, where, what, and how. And in the how, we're going to talk about the case study. So before I jump into automations, I feel like that's a really hot button word and people are using it everywhere with the, more use of AI technology. But this automation work is like, what is an automation? We've all heard of it, but it's really just a way of taking out the manual tasks that people do and automating things that are already happening in your business. And so it's about reducing or minimizing the effort required to complete a task. So just that simple. It's removing the human required to do the task. And a lot of people set up automations that never do any critical work in ensuring that it has any business impact. And so I really want to talk about that today. And I'm going to start there. So what I would consider a high impact automation blueprint has three things. And so the first one is that it works as it's designed. So if you went to the effort of setting something up to automate, let's say, a calendar booking and a confirmation email, if that doesn't work every single time that appointment's booked, then it's not a useful automation. So that key thing that it works as designed every single time is really critical. And then this next thing, I'm going to pre-frame by saying this is, if you take nothing away from what I've said today, this next key component, like take note, and that is documentation and organization. So anytime you're building a system in your business, there should be some kind of companion document explaining how that automation works and why it's been set up that way. And this helps organizations not become a slave to your own automation and how they're set up. And I'm going to give the most common real world example that I see about this. So in law firms, maybe you're getting set up with a CRM, and that work gets given to somebody on your team. Maybe it's somebody in intake, maybe it's an intern, somebody who volunteers, and they get it all set up and it works most of the time, or you think it works most of the time. And then that person decides that they're going to leave the firm. And I have seen so many times there's no documentation about what's happening. And so then all of a sudden, nobody can manage it. They can't add to it. They can't even figure out where this like random automated email is coming from. And so like having that documentation, not in the system itself, but separate, so that anyone that needs to could pick that up and figure out what's happening where, is a really, really critical thing. And I know, for years, a paralegal might stay at a firm for 30 years. And we just don't see that anymore. Like you might have high turnover. So this additional documentation is really helpful for everyone. And really, as the firm owner or the person who's in charge of operations, it's going to be really critical. So that's like my biggest takeaway, and something that I really focus on when I'm helping law firms set up their automations.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then
I was going to add on, a lot of businesses have or build what are called standard operating procedures. So a lot of times you'll hear businesses refer to these as SOPs, or those standard operating procedures. And that term is an older term, especially when things were done manually, when you had a task list and this was how it was done. But that still applies today with automation. And those tasks, even if it's being done with automation, you still have to write it down. You still have to write, here is where this automation is maintained. And I'll add on, Wendy, labeling your automations, especially because later in the webinar today, you're going to start talking about using third-party tools and things like that to automate. If your automations are just labeled automation 1, automation 2, automation 3, you are going to be in a world of hurt a year later when you're trying to troubleshoot. So not only documenting, but also labeling your automations as you build them, and having those standard naming schemes and things like that. So digging in a little bit deeper there.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because I have literally seen 100 automations and they just have a number next to them. And then when I ask what those are, they're like, oh, someone has that somewhere. And so that scheme can sometimes be a challenge to identify, like, how do I want to name these? But certainly that's something I've mastered at this point. So if you've got questions later, feel free to connect. Okay, so then the third component of a high impact automation is that it's measurable. So you should be able to easily report on how that automation is literally tied to the performance of your business. So whether that's in time or, frankly, sometimes in staff overwhelm. Did the overwhelm of your key staff members go down when you implemented that? And an example that I just recently set up for a firm was, if a client didn't sign an engagement agreement, we put them in a drip campaign, a nurture campaign, to keep in touch with them to figure out maybe why they didn't sign, because oftentimes it's just a not right now. And when I asked that firm, like, do you have any sense for how many of these leads historically might have been coming back? And they had no idea. So we set up a reporting tool that allowed them to track every person that came back and signed a contract after going through that nurture campaign. So she could directly tie that automation to increased business down the road. And that's just really helpful when you're trying to keep track of anything, right? Like where is your business coming from? Where are your clients falling out of your process, or where are they choosing to re-engage? So the measurable part is really big. And that's another one that I think is oftentimes lacking when people think about the automations themselves. And a good tool, like this is kind of an aside, but any good tool is going to give you the flexibility to do that, some of that measuring. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right, so I'm just going to pause. Does anybody have any questions about the why? I think that's kind of self-explanatory, but feel free to put it in the chat. All right, so then now we're going to move on to where. So key business areas that I see as really ripe for automation. And that is, like, you know what they are now. So the next step is to identify where can you improve the efficiency in your business using these. And so I like to think of it as employee facing tasks and customer facing tasks. And so I'll break down employee facing tasks first. And you can think of those as anything happening internally. Let's see if anybody responds to this, but if everybody or anyone is willing to put in the chat, if they're in any other field other than law, will you just put your industry in the chat so that I can maybe speak a little bit more directly to you? And if not, I'll just talk about what works for me. But in terms of our internal tasks that only require employee action or collaboration between employees. And the way I think about that in the terms of service delivery, like we're talking about today, internal tasks might be, I'll probably use estate planning attorneys a lot because they've got really great service delivery automation sort of built in. But an internal task might be somebody needs to communicate with the paralegal about the estate planning drafts. And so that's all happening internally. And so you can automate that. You can fill out the attorney can fill out a form. And when that form that has all the details about the estate plan gets submitted, the paralegal can automatically be assigned a task. And so that's these two staff members that are tying together the sequence based on each one taking the necessary step. And so that helps in service delivery because the next staff member and their task is automatically assigned, and there doesn't need to be quite as much communication. And it's funny because Jessica and I were talking earlier about Slack and email, and sometimes our channels of communication are bombarded. And so having this really streamlined way of communicating with internal folks, what has been done and what needs to be done, is really great if you're just using a task management solution or a CRM. And like I said, we'll talk about another one that we'll talk about is ClickUp, or just project management. So pipelines help keep track of where clients are in the process of service delivery. And so examples of some additional internal employee-facing tasks are project setups, document preparation, any kind of document review, time tracking and billing, and then deadline management and status updates. And I know that that's a really big one in law because you've got specific timelines based on the legal structures that are in place in your state for whatever area of law that you're practicing. So those are really great things to automate away and just sort of make them disappear, and you only have to think about it when the task pops up. And then there's the customer facing tasks. And these are just anything externally facing. Sometimes they're tasks, but I like to also think of them as actions that require the client to take some action, or even a client employee collaboration to complete that. And so examples of those might be client data tracking or gathering. So intake forms, onboarding forms, and engagement agreements, fee collection, whether that's upfront fees or back-end fees, and then any kind of appointment, whether that's the appointment booking or the confirmations or reminders or any information that needs to be captured to make that appointment useful. And then I have a document delivery, I think is a really big one too, that if you have a really good system set up, oftentimes documents can be generated very quickly using something called a merge field. You may be familiar with merge fields, but they're just ways that you put in the template document with the client data that populates automatically. Okay, so those, the customer facing and employee facing, I hope that makes some sense for you. And that's just a really great way if you're wondering, how can I get started with automation? If you feel really uncomfortable with that, which I think a lot of people do, they don't know the tools, they feel really uncomfortable about it. So if that is you, I would recommend starting with automations that are internal or employee facing, because it gives you an opportunity to learn how the tool works, to feel comfortable that if it didn't work as expected, your client isn't the one that's receiving that accidental automation. And so I would start with your employee facing, and then once you feel comfortable with the tools or you feel comfortable with how that flow works, then move on to customer facing so that you can sort of protect your brand, if you will. All right. Now I want to talk about the what. So this is where we're going to deep dive into 3 of the tools that I just wanted to highlight today. I use all 3 of these tools in my own business. And again, I'm not a lawyer. So I wanted to highlight these because I wanted everyone to know that you don't have to be in one particular area of business in order to benefit from lots of these. And so I'll talk about ClickUp first. And ClickUp is what I would describe as just a project manager. There are so many of these on the market. If you just go to Google and type in project management software, you will forever be in the algorithm of getting information about them. But I like ClickUp. It was really simple for me to set up. I use it kind of low level. I don't have massive automations in there because I just need it for a handful of things. So ClickUp as a project management tool, and the reason I won't talk about the reason I really love it, but we'll get there. So ClickUp just allows you to set up automated tasks. So if you have standard project tasks to finish a service delivery, whatever that is, then you can predetermine or set up templates for tasks. And then you can set up automations like when this task is completed, generate this new template. And you can set up how that's assigned or to which staff member it's assigned. And so it just makes things really easy to get all of the tasks done in the right order and without overwhelming anybody, because they're only assigned the tasks when it's relevant. And some of the key features are for ClickUp are task management, obviously, but it's really nice because you can create lists and folders. So in my business, I've got lists for my own internal work, the work that I need to do. And then I have folders for planning that. And then I have client lists. So if there's work that gets generated in client calls, I can create really simple automated follow-up tasks for myself to keep track of all the things that I'm going to be working on for the client that are outside of the standard scope. And then timelines. I really, really love ClickUp for timelines. Collaborations are much easier because there's a wonderful chat feature where you can keep updated. So even in my own business, at the end of every day, if there's tasks on my list that I didn't get completed, I've got a team member who can also complete those. And I can just chat in that task explicitly, like where I'm at, why it's not complete, what's left to do, so that he can finish it. And then you can also upload documents and keep recordings, make Loom videos and put them in there. So each item is this little unique space that you can manage and collaborate with internal folks. And I really love that. And I'm going to talk about an example of how you can use ClickUp and how it integrates really well with Smith, because even on the back end, there's a lot of stuff that can be happening around integrations with other software, but we haven't talked about Zapier. So I guess that's a good introduction. I'll talk about Zapier for a second. And if you don't know what Zapier is, it's a tool that allows you to connect lots of different tools. So you can use Zapier to connect ClickUp to your CRM. You can use Zapier to connect your CRM to your Google Drive. And I don't even know, I would say there might be upwards of 1,000 connections with Zapier to other platforms. So it becomes the glue.
I was going to say there's over 5,000 apps on the Zapier marketplace now.
Yeah, and
they just hit 5,000, I think earlier this year.
Wow. Yeah. So 5,000 softwares that you can use to integrate into this beautiful system of delivering whatever product you're selling to your client. And so Zapier is a really great tool if you've not heard of it. And like I said, I'm going to go through in a few minutes sort of a way of using Zapier to connect all these tools. And the last tool I want to talk about is Lawmatics. So Lawmatics is a CRM. It's legal specific. And because it's my area of expertise, I wanted to talk about it here and in some of our walkthroughs and the case study, of course, because it's a really great tool and, you know, can fill in the place of any CRM if you're not in the legal industry. So Lawmatics is known for intake and marketing. And what that looks like is capturing data to move a client or potential client through an intake process until they've hired your company or the firm. And then the client engagement tools allow you to interact with the client with text messages, emails, appointment bookings, document prep, e-signatures. It's just such a robust system that it allows almost anything that you need to get done in an intake process happening all in one platform. And then on the marketing side, there's event management, there's newsletter management. And so it can really, and then it will track marketing sources and generate ROI on each of those sources to give really important information about what marketing is serving your law firm and what marketing maybe isn't worth the time. And so and then I use Lawmatics. So I'm not a lawyer, but I use Lawmatics because I love being really intimately familiar with the way my clients are interacting with their CRM. And frankly, it has every single tool that I need to run my business. And the only reason I use ClickUp is because I can't be in more than one law firm's Lawmatics account at a time. And so I need ClickUp to be this external task manager. But I actually do my own service delivery for my law firm clients inside of Lawmatics. And I use all the automated features for their service delivery so that I can build out their entire system using Lawmatics. And I just really love that. I love that it's so functional, a tool that even me, a non-lawyer, can use it. And I'm not selling Lawmatics to people that aren't lawyers, but I do think that it is a really beautiful platform for CPA style work. Anybody that has a repeating client year after year that needs like new data and new information. So that's something that you'd want to look for if that was something that your firm or office did. And then I really love Lawmatics, and it's probably the reason why we're even here is that Lawmatics integrates really, really beautifully with Smith. So on the virtual reception side, Smith can answer a call, and that will seamlessly create a matter inside of the Lawmatics account, and they can capture all kinds of critical client data for the intake process that there's no manual secondary information that needs to be entered because Smith is taking care of that for you. And then it's already there. And I really love that because I've talked to plenty of firms who don't use virtual reception, and you know, that's okay. They've got somebody inside that handles that. But those receptionists are oftentimes doing so much internal just data entry. And so using a company like Smith is a really great tool to increase efficiency and just capture all that information and automatically transfer it. So the Lawmatics Smith integration is really beautiful, and worked for tons of my clients. And so I'm really grateful for the work of that integration and the work that Smith does, frankly. So those three tools, ClickUp, Lawmatics, and Zapier, I'm going to give you some examples of what that looks like. And hopefully this doesn't feel hard to listen to. So I'm going to try to walk through a simple process, and I'll talk about like what the step might look like initially, and then how that might function after an automation has been processed or put in place to take that action. And so we'll talk about this hypothetical example of how to use ClickUp for an automation to set up a client project and ensure smooth service delivery downstream. And so let's say that you're a digital agency like Matterflow Advisors, and you use ClickUp for managing that client work. So I know this is going to sound funny too, but like, imagine that you literally are personally answering a phone call from a prospective new client on your cell phone. Like, that's hard. It's not actually hard, right? Talking to your client's not hard, or potential client, but the fact that they're calling you on your cell phone, like, nobody needs that. So if you could automate that, then you literally could just hire Smith to answer a beautiful phone call and say, "Hi, this is Matterflow Advisors. How can we help you?" And Smith will qualify that lead for you. And instead of answering that call and taking a bunch of notes on an app or a document or even a pen and paper, or if you're me, I have a whiteboard desk and I literally sometimes write things down on my desk, and then I'll screenshot it later because I'm like, oh shoot, that's going to get nudged away by my elbow as I type. So not doing that, but rather capturing that structured caller information in some kind of intake form and submitting that, so that you can capture more than just their name and phone number and some basic questions, but like literally capturing as much of that intake as possible. And I think
ClickUp does have intake forms.
Yeah, and it's cool. Yeah, but I think one thing I really like about the flexibility of Smith too is like you can do an intake form from the CRM. I know at least with Lawmatics, you could, like, your agents could capture the actual intake form or just submit the caller data over and it still creates a matter. And so it's a really streamlined way of doing that. But now let's say you made all those notes, you could go into ClickUp and like do some things. But if you had automated that process, then Zapier could be triggered when that call completes and a task can automatically be created to return that phone call. So you don't have to do that. Let's say the next step would be to create a new client folder for that new potential client that came in. You could use Zapier to actually create that client folder. And that's what I do. When I have a new client that signs an engagement agreement with me, I have a Zap that registers that that client has signed the contract and paid. It goes and searches my Google Drive for an existing client folder. If one doesn't exist, it creates it with the name I've instructed it to create the folder for. And then it populates my project document for me in that folder so that all my team knows where to find it. And then Zapier will push the link to that document back to Lawmatics for me, so that anytime I want to give access to the client to view that document, I can populate it automatically into an email. And then, so the next step maybe is to create a new intake list, and you can have Zapier create that new client list in ClickUp as well. So you can see maybe how all these manual tasks of like answering the call, taking the notes, manually adding these things, that entire process can happen within 30 seconds after whatever trigger you've set is completed. And that would have taken, I used to do it manually before I set up my own automated structures. And it really did take me 25 to 30 minutes to get a new client project set up. And now I don't do anything and it's there. And then I have a task that asks me to do the next step. And then I'll point out that ClickUp is really great because Zapier, we call them Zaps if you don't know, but you can create a Zap that will create a new task from a template. And then you can have a Zap insert all of that Smith AI data from the call right into that task. So then you can see all the information that you need, and it becomes one place to house everything about that client. And yeah, ClickUp has intake forms as well. It's a really great tool.
Right. And
I'd say oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and keep in mind, if you're not using ClickUp, just take everything we're saying and remove the word ClickUp and insert the tool that you're using. All of these ideas and all of these concepts can apply to your project management tool or your practice management tool. You just have to, think about the tasks that you're doing today that are repetitive. They paid the new project invoice. What happens next? What happens next? What happens next? Just write out every step that you take that is the same for every new client and automate it. So it doesn't have to be this specific tool. So if you're not using this tool, still take these same concepts and think about how you can apply them to your business.
Yeah, and I really love that, right? You can just sort of insert any project management tool, and they don't all do the same things, but most of them have really standard functions to move any kind of client through any kind of project. So I think they're really great. Yeah.
Although ClickUp is amazing. I mean, I'm a huge fan of ClickUp as well.
Yeah. And to your point, Jessica, I know you mentioned, or maybe you didn't, I think you mentioned that I have a little e-workbook that you're going to share after. And I actually walk you through like how I walk my clients through identifying all of those tasks that can be automated away. Because really, like, isn't that just the most magical thing where you don't have to touch a thing and it just appears where you need it and when you need it? So if this feels a little overwhelming, just know that there's a workbook that will help you at the end. And I'm also available if you ever want to reach out to just ask any questions. All right, so the customer facing service delivery tasks, I'm going to walk through a similar before after, but this is using Lawmatics and what that could look like in terms of automating in a service delivery pipeline. So what comes to mind for me first when I think of that is back to estate planning documents. Those get created and then they need to be reviewed. And there's tons of information that needs to be verified by the client to make sure that that estate plan is in fact what they want. So, with Lawmatics, like I said, Smith can answer that call. They can capture that initial data, and you can automate an intake form to be sent to the client before any kind of consultation scheduled. And once that client is hired, you're still going to need to interact with them to capture all of the additional requirements. So I'm going to mention this here too before I dive into that. But one of the things that I love is that because Smith will do a specific CRM form with Lawmatics, I've set up clients where when they call, when Smith answers the phone, they ask the client, are you a new client for the firm or are you an existing client? And if it's an existing client, when that form gets submitted, you can set up an automation to have a staff member respond to that, or you can automatically respond with a text message that says, oh, we got your call. Thanks for all the details. We'll get back to you. And so those little touches, I think we talk a lot about automations as like they do the mundane things, but they also can do the magical things of making your customer feel seen, attended to, like you still know what's going on in their life by just having these simple automations. I think that's why I really love the Smith integration, because you can set up these little alerts for the client that lets them know that you're still working on what they called about while the actual staff member does the digging. So the example about automating documents, the example I want to highlight is reviewing all of the information for the estate planning documents, like I said. So you could prepare those documents and then you can send them in an email as an attachment. Or if you're just looking to get a verification from the client, you can create a document that merges all the data in automatically and then attaches that document as an e-signature so that when the client reviews it and submits it with their signature, the next task can be assigned, or the documents, the final estate planning documents can be prepared. So instead of attaching the email directly, you use the automation to populate and send the document. Instead of that back and forth email phone tag game that I think we all play with clients and potential clients, you can send a form directly to the client in an automated way at exactly the right time in the process. Instead of manually following up on that signed document, you can automate a system of follow-up that just happens naturally at certain intervals until the client signs. I know some firms that still do even their e-signatures manually, where they're setting it up, uploading it to an e-signature platform and sending it. And all of that can be automated away. And then, like I said, once those documents are signed and received back, then you can send all the internal notifications for the employees to take their next steps. And I think that that's just a really incredible way of eliminating internal tasks and reducing the overwhelm of the clients or the overwhelm of the staff. And I want to highlight again, if I haven't said it, for me, I see that as a beautiful opportunity to be exceptional in a way that only a human can be exceptional, right? So having somebody make a phone call to say, hey, we're so grateful that you got those documents in on time. We're taking the next step. Because all of that process was automated, now that staff member has the time to make that follow-up call to just say, thanks for getting that over. And it's not required because the client knows, but it allows for that little special touch that I think the humans in our work system do so well. All right, so just a couple more things. Appointment scheduling, status updates on cases that require long wait times, document reviews and signatures are a big one, and client data verification. So those are key things for you to think about. If you do those things manually now, you probably can automate them with a tool, a variety of tools, but Lawmatics, ClickUp, those things can be handled there. And I'm gonna stop for another second. I don't want to ramble too much. We're at the case study part of this. And so I just want to make sure that there's no questions that anybody has in the chat about what can be automated, why, how we report on them, documentation, anything.
Absolutely. Would love to get some questions if there are any.
We got a quiet
or
crowd,
Wendy,
and that's okay.
would you like to put the ebook in the
chat?
In the chat. I am going to email it out after as well.
I will.
So when I email the recording, I will also email out. Nope, that's not the ebook you're highlighting.
Yeah, it is. Link to the bonus.
Oh, okay. Ah, there you go.
I'm like, yes, I hope it. Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to email out the recording and the ebook and Wendy's contact information and all of that. We still haven't gotten any questions.
Yeah, I'll talk about the case study too, just as to highlight ways that I've helped firms. And this is a particular estate planning firm, and I'll give you a little bit of background about them before I tell you how I helped. But when I found them, they were a referral from an existing client of mine. And when I first talked to them, they were not using a single tool to help with automation. So their client services director was manually sending confirmations and reminders, mostly, to clients when they booked appointments. They were handling manual engagement agreements. They were collecting cash or check in the office, and they had no email automations happening at any stage. And so every time they reached out to a client, it was all manual work. And the women who worked in the office, it was a couple of women on the staff side, they were perpetually overwhelmed, and even getting information from them to get their system set up felt overwhelming for them because they were so bogged down with all the work that they needed to do. And so when I meet a firm like that, the first thing I do is like, let's set up a process. So we walk through what are the stages, as I like to call them, what are the stages of this process? And then every appointment, reminder, and confirmation get automated. Every email communication touch point gets automated. And then every form that needs to be filled or document that is template worthy needed to be created, those got automated. And I think it's, it's still kind of crazy to me that they had some tools, like they were using a platform for texting with their clients, but they were a slave to that platform. They were a slave to doing it manually. And the client services director said, "Oh, I get back to most of the clients with a confirmation. I hope I get to sending them a reminder text about their appointment." And this is an attorney who had been in practice for a long time and had a lot of referral clients. So I know they were keeping their clients happy, but the women were really struggling to keep up with the workload with that growing base of clients. And so they were overwhelmed. And so what we did is we integrated their intake forms with Smith. They were actually a Smith client, tried to find a good one that was already working with Smith for our case study. But we integrated all of their intake forms, not just the pushing of the initial data over, so that they could capture all of that upfront information without needing to data entry later. And then, so that client data got into their CRM from the beginning. When the new matter was created from the Smith call, we automatically sent an additional follow-up form with some additional information and also their booking form. So it said, if you want to book this appointment, the consultation, fill out this additional form, which captured more of their estate planning information. And then we automated the fee collection with invoices that had automated follow-up for those, so that if they didn't pay in a certain time frame, they got automated. And then we automated their engagement agreement, but still had enough flexibility in that so that it didn't feel so rigid, because that was one of their concerns, that having this automation would limit their flexibility. So we wanted to design their system with a lot of that flexibility. And then when the client hired and paid the firm, we managed all of the rest of their service delivery for estate planning, but also probate. I don't know if any probate lawyers are here, but it was kind of a hardy job to get all of the probate tasks done. But they are saving probably 20 to 30 hours a week between the two staff members for that work alone, for probate and for estate planning. And they don't and their clients are showing up to more meetings, they're getting less reschedules, and the clients are just feeling more attended to. And so they're experiencing higher Google reviews since we implemented their system. And we actually did implement a Google review system automatically, so that when clients are satisfied with the work that the firm did, we automatically send them a Google link to capture that Google review. So this was probably one of the biggest transformations that I've seen, because they had just barely signed up for Lawmatics and had just barely signed up with Smith, and they didn't really know how to work it. And so it turned out to be this beautiful integration for them, where they were able to learn how to manage everything with the new system and feel the relief of that. And I love hearing firms talk about the hours saved, because it's just such a heavy workload when you have lots of cases. And these are great tools that make all of that so much easier.
That is definitely an example of you can buy the tools, but you have to also learn how to use those tools and implement the tools. So, just having Smith.ai or just having Lawmatics or purchasing the best software out there isn't enough. You also have to go through the motions of the standard operating procedures, finding those pain points and building the automation. So just buying the tool, frankly, it's not enough. And that's where sometimes we see businesses struggling is sitting down and putting together just that documentation. And it's not as painful as it sounds. It truly
No.
isn't, because the painful part is living through the manual process. That's the painful part, is admitting
Yeah.
that, you know, it needs to be fixed. Once you get over that, it's easy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, I noticed, I talked to somebody a couple of days ago and she's like, I don't even know what I need. I just know what I don't want. And, it's
That's
like
true.
you're really stuck in the pain of what I don't want. But, it really is a fairly quick process to just walk through what it is that needs to happen. And then that's what the ebook is designed to do, is like just break it down into these simple steps. And then, the end, spoiler alert, the end of my ebook is like, great, now go build everything. And I do think that that is the most challenging part, because it requires learning a new tool, whether that's ClickUp or some other project management tool or a new CRM. They're all built so different. And so you have to dig into and be willing to learn how to use the tool so that
Yes.
it becomes an effective automation tool.
Mhm.
And that can be a real challenge, which is why I guess firms like mine exist in the first place.
And I think the other challenge I see is some businesses, they have these grand goals, and I love grand goals. But my favorite saying is, Wendy, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a
One
time.
bite at a time. Okay. So to get to the grand goal of automating your firm, and you have to do one step at a time. Just find one pain point and solve that one small pain point, and then move on to the next pain point. You're not going to solve every problem today. You're not going to solve everything. Just solve one pain point at a time. So remember that. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's what I tell
Yeah.
people every day.
Yeah,
It's
it's
my
a
favorite
beautiful way of
saying.
looking at it. Yeah, it really is. And it's super effective, because otherwise you're overwhelmed, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to be, because you can just, like, for me, setting up the client folder automation, like that was just a thing. I was like, why am I still doing this manually? It's exactly the same every time. And I thought, oh, I bet these tools I already have and pay for can do this. And so
Yeah.
really it's just having the awareness of, oh, what kinds of things can I use this tool for? And deciding just to do it.
It's just one small step.
Yeah.
So I'd love it if there were any questions. You guys that are here, go ahead, drop any questions you have either in the Q&A or in the chat. Wendy, I would love it if you could tell us more about Matter Flow Advisors while we wait for some questions to come in, and how we can get a hold of
Sure.
you.
Yeah. So we actually got some great questions from Joseph. And so I'll just answer those. So any suggestions for getting started doing Lawmatics? Yeah. So Joseph, the ebook will really walk you through how to think through your process, because I believe that without putting together a holistic intention for your Lawmatics, you're going to feel like you're creating a bunch of small automations, but then it gets a little overwhelming and you're not sure that it's like working as a flow of automations. So just doing that first, putting it together. And then, is Lawmatics University a good resource? I believe it is a really great resource. What I find about Lawmatics University is that it's geared towards building and user interfacing. And that's really challenging, because you probably only have one builder in the office, and most people are going to need training on how to use it as a user. So it's certainly an awesome place to start. And yeah, like there's no reason not to give that a go and learn everything that you can, because they really are genuinely trying to walk you through how to navigate the system and do all of the critical pieces. And then any YouTube videos I'm familiar with, the answer to that is not really. There's a handful of YouTube videos about Lawmatics specifically from a couple of different sources. I'm literally going to be making some soon. I'm realizing that there's a lot that isn't out there and that you don't even know to look for. So I'm going to be making, like, my next video is about how to use custom fields, when to use them, and then how to make that easy. So I think, unfortunately, the YouTube resources are not that strong with Lawmatics, and that's just because it's pretty niche around law firms. But if you would like, I think the ebook's a great place for you to start in terms of getting started with your process, and then watching and doing the Lawmatics University is a great place to start. All right, that might be it. So, oh yeah, of course. So I think, well, I'll tell a little bit about Matterflow Advisors and the services that we offer. And you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Wendy Wylde, and that is how you find me there. I've got a Matterflow Advisors page, but frankly, I just do almost everything on my personal page. So if you want to get a hold of me, there's even a book a consultation link right there on LinkedIn. And you can book on my calendar right from there, and you'll get a confirmation and an email reminder. And if you give me your text phone number, then I will send you a text about it. So that's how you can get in touch with me. In terms of our services, we've got a variety of things. I tend to be really great at custom builds. So if you're a law firm that is really specific about how you want that workflow to go, and you know that you don't have this time or the staff to do that for you, we really love doing that work, because you are an engaged attorney in your firm and you know how to guide me into what you need, and I can build that beautifully for you. And there's no reason for you to be spending your hours doing Lawmatics builds when you're a lawyer. I have a background in technology, so it's easy for me to do the technology work, and then you can do the lawyer work. The other kinds of clients that we do really well with and that we provide great service to are clients who kind of feel lost and just need somebody to walk them through the process of planning and designing, and then hands off on the build. So we do a lot of that work. It's actually fairly quickly. I can get to the root of it. I know what questions to ask. I know what can be and cannot be done if you're using Lawmatics. And so I can get to the root of potential problems before you ever see them. And so a lot of firms come to me when they're like, I just don't know how to do this myself, and I don't want to. And I love that, because I'm really good at it. So I'm happy to do it for you. And then just one other piece that I've been working on, if this is useful to anybody, we have built a user-specific training that actually gets installed in your Lawmatics account as a pipeline in and of itself, so that you can enter all of your users into the user training, and they get just what they need to know to be a user inside of Lawmatics, without all of the details about how to build and how to create. And my clients, when you engage with me, I give that to you for free. But if you just want that alone, then that's a sort of standalone product that we sell that makes using Lawmatics easy. And what's great about that is if you have a new staff member, you own that tool forever. So you can put any new staff member through it, and they can learn Lawmatics, and then they can integrate really quickly into your firm. And we can even do a little bit of custom work to put your standard operating procedures in that training pipeline, so that your staff members know what they need to do inside of Lawmatics. So those are the key services that we offer.
Thank you, Wendy. And for those of you who aren't Smith.ai customers, I know I recognize a few names in the attendee list, but if you aren't a Smith.ai customer, I'm Jessica with Smith.ai, and we are a virtual receptionist service, which means we answer phone calls, website chats, and SMS messages on behalf of businesses. So we can do everything from lead qualification, lead intake, and appointment booking. That's the short version. I put my website and the my email address in the chat. Like I said, I will be emailing out the recording, the ebook, both of our contact information, and everything else after. So please let me know if you need anything. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much, Wendy. It was a pleasure to have you today. And everyone, have a great, great Thursday, almost Friday.
Thanks, Jessica.
Bye.
Bye.